All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and we are about to start our adventure going through Murach's Android Programming Second Edition by Joel Murach. And I'm going to go over Chapter 1 and the PowerPoints for Chapter 1 right now. You'll notice that it's an overview of Android. We'll talk about different types of Android devices, types of apps you can build for Android, a brief history, versions, system architecture, how apps are compiled and run, and we'll end up with an introduction to Android Studio. All right, so let's just take it from the top. You'll notice there's only 15 slides in here, so this probably at least won't take very long. And I'm not going to lie to you, I have not yet loaded Android Studio on the computer I'm using, so it should be interesting. So Chapter 1, an introduction to Android and Android Studio. Here are our objectives. Our applied objective is given an Android Studio project for an app. Use Android Studio to open the project, view the layout and the source code for an activity, and run the app on an emulator or physical device. Our knowledge objectives: name 2 types of Android devices, name and describe 3 types of Android apps, briefly describe the history of Android, name some of the versions of Android and describe how the version number compares with the API level, name the 4 layers of the Android stack, describe how Android compiles and interprets code, describe where Android Studio stores the XML and Java files for an activity, describe how you can run an app on a physical device or an emulator. So, one of the things that we talked about are the 2 basic types of Android devices. The 2 basic types are Android smartphones and Android tablets. Now, Android is also available in a lot of other things, and many of these are discussed in the book. Such things as readers, cameras, home automation systems, etc. In your car, in your house. Different types of Android apps, and as you'd guess, this is not an exhaustive list. We're going to look at some of these as we go on in here. All right, the history of Android. Again, is this worth going over? Let's just mention a couple things. 2005, Google buys Android. Maybe the most important part of the history or chronology that we're looking at. Because with Google means power, with Google means money. So they put power and money into Android. And now millions of apps have been developed and billions of those have been downloaded. Versions of Android, this is actually a little outdated because I believe there's version 7 out right now and I don't even remember the name of it, and it's not that important. Let's look at this distribution percentages. So let's see if can we click on that? I think we can go to it from here. I can grab this. Go into here and open up a new window and paste it in. So that was it. 7 is nougat. Okay. So here are the percentages of Android that are being used right now. You'll notice that there is nothing below 2.3.3. And that just means that were there versions of Android before that? Yes, going back to version 1, but no one's using them because they're so antiquated. All right. So when you look in here, only, less than a percent using gingerbread, less than 1% using ice cream sandwich. You'll notice that the majority are using marshmallow and lollipop, which are the 2 latest versions, followed by Kit Kat and nougat. All right, so if you took right here and you stopped at 4.4, you'd have what? 17, 24, 25, 47, 78, 79, 89, about 90% of the usage of current Android is being used in 4.4 and above. 0.7, 1.4, 4.2, 8.3, 9.5. The reason that this is important is if you, for example, let's say that you want Gingerbread because you want everyone to be able to use all of the features. You've got this great app and everybody back through Gingerbread should be able to use it. Then typically what that means is any new features that have been added, for example, in Lollipop, you won't be able to use. So you're best off maybe starting with KitKat or having KitKat be your lowest version. Now that's me speaking. That's not from some book or whatever. All right, let's continue on. So this is what's called the Android stack, and you may or may not be able to tell by looking at it, but it's 4 layers deep. As you go down in layers, you get more towards the machine level. As you go up in layers, you go more towards the end user layer. Now, what I'm about to show you, this isn't anything wow or whatever, but I wanted to show you something, and that is, let's see. I'm going to very quickly draw something up here. When I say very quickly, you'll know it because it's not going to look very professional. Oops. I don't want pictures. I want shapes. And I want this. And I'm going to draw a circle. Make it pretty circular. All right. Inside of that circle, if I can do this, I want to draw another circle. Okay, so there's one circle. That's good enough. And let's fill that, and we'll make that there. And then inside of there, and I promise you it's the last one, I'm going to put in yet another circle. All right, and we'll fill that one too. And we'll make that one there. All right, now this is my picture. If you don't like it, not a problem. But I just want to show you something, and that is this. I'm going to go in again to insert shapes, and I just want a line here. So I want to make a line from here. I want to make a line from here. Oopsie. So I want to make a line from here. No, not from there. Sorry. I want to make a line from here. Boy, oh boy. And finally, I want to make a line from here. All right, so this inner line, I don't know if it's going to allow me to insert text, but I'm going to try to. Insert text box, simple text box. I don't want to move this. I don't want it there. I'll just leave it like that. There you go. And I'm going to put here operating system. Don't know what happened right there. Also known as the OS. All right, so that's the first thing. Shouldn't have done that. I didn't want it to twirl there. We'll just leave it there. This next one here, again, I guess I'm not proficient enough with this to make it twirl the way I want it to twirl. right, in fact, now that I look at it, this one that's down here, I want this to say machine. And finally, the one that's right here, I want this one to say, come on, get out of there, stop it. That's real nice. I want this one to say user. So why am I wasting your time showing you all this stuff? All right, because what I want to show you is the operating system is what exists between the machine and the user. All right, and the reason that it's important that you have at least somewhat of an understanding of that, all right, the reason that that's important is that when you see a picture such as the one in the slide right here, it's important that you realize that what they show down here with Linux kernel, that's at the bottom. That is at the machine level right there. I'm not going to read any of that stuff to you. But that's the stuff that allows you to interact with the computer itself. That's the operating system stuff. Then we've got libraries. It's kind of interesting that these libraries, although they work with both the kernel, the application framework, and the application, the libraries are not written in Java. They're typically written in C and C++ because C and C++ typically run faster than any other programming language. You'll also notice that what we have here is what's called the Android runtime and the Dalvik virtual machine. When you use, quote, regular Java, unquote, what you're using with regular Java is you are using what's called the Java virtual machine. All right? That is replaced in Android with what's called the Dalvik virtual machine. And we'll have more to say about that later. As we traverse our way up the Android stack, next we have the application framework. These are things that are built into Android that you're able to use in coordination with the applications and the libraries. But these are things that have been written for you, and to my knowledge at least, they're written in Java. Then at the top are the applications, both the ones that you create and existing Java applications, things like your email app, your contacts app, etc., along with the different things that we're going to create. All right, so this is the Android system architecture. I should have my book open right now, and I do not. So as we open it up, this is the picture that's shown on page 15 in the chapter. So they do mention in here that when you develop an Android app, you typically use an IDE, an integrated development environment, to create your Android project. All right. In the past, you used you created Android apps using or utilizing Eclipse. All right. Well, what happened was a few years ago, Google announced that Android Studio would be the official software to be used to create Android applications. So that's what I plan on using in here. All right, we will use Java as our programming language, but I at least want to get into, and I don't know how much time we'll have to do this, something that's called Kotlin, Kotlin, which most people think that over time will replace Java. It's very Java-ish in the way it looks, but it can typically result in less code. All right. So we will create our Android project using Android Studio for our IDE. After we get done creating our Android project, we will run it through the compilation process. So what we'll have to end up doing is to let's do what's called build our project. All right, when we do this, you have to build it before you run it, and we'll be able to build it automatically from inside of the Android Studio IDE. What happens when the IDE builds the project, it compiles your Java source code into what are called Java bytecodes or class files, and then into these DEX files. DEX stands for Dalvik executable files. These are the files that can be run by that Dalvik virtual machine that we looked at right there. All right, and again, that's available on all Android devices. When the IDE builds a project, it puts all these files together into what's called an Android package file or a .apk file. And an APK file contains everything necessary for you to run your app on either an Android device, all right, and an Android device would, as an example, a tablet or an Android phone, or you can also use what's called the emulator, and we'll look at both those as time goes on. Now, to run an app on an emulator or a device, the app must be signed with a digital certificate. This is something that's discussed back, all the way into chapter 17. So we won't worry about it anymore. But that's the signing thing that you see right here. All right, one more thing that's not shown here it's right here. And that's the ADB, which stands for Android Debug Bridge. That allows your IDE, Android Studio, the integrated development environment, to communicate with either an emulator or the actual device itself. All right, so the rest of the chapter here all goes over Android Studio. That starts on page 16 and it goes through page, 25. So the last 10 pages of the chapter. Now, again, I do not believe, and I'll check my machine right here, that I have Android Studio in here. So, but what I can do is I can go out, I don't really need, I'll leave that there, what the heck. And I can come out to Google, and under Google I can type in Android Studio download. All right, android.com, there's Android Studio. Download Android Studio. This is the official Android site, https://developer.android.com. But I'm going to click right there. And it says download Android Studio. The date is 7/24/2017. So the current Android Studio version is 2.3.3 for Windows. So I'm going to click there. Terms and conditions. I'm going to say I've read them and I agree with them. Download Android Studio for Windows. It's coming here, so I'm going to tell it to open when it's done. There are some steps out here that explain everything that has to be done, but you'll notice to install, launch the exe file. I'm telling it to do that, but it says here opening in a few minutes because it's still downloading everything. And then follow the setup wizard to install. So that's what we'll end up doing, but notice it still has about 7 minutes to go. All right. And while it's going, what I'm going to do is kind of go through the rest of the slides here. This is what the welcome page will look like when we get to that point. And yours will probably be empty, as will mine, because we don't have any projects we've created yet. But once you start to create projects, they'll be shown here in our recent projects window. This is quick start. I would recommend that you start all your new projects from here, and there are a few things you can look through the documentation and the like. So you can open an existing project from here, or if it's over here, from here. This is the logo, and here's your welcome screen. This is how it's laid out. All right. Now, the good news, bad news, depending on your point of view, is there's a lot of stuff here, and it's not laid out exactly the way that Visual Studio is laid out. All right. This area in here is known as your projects area, and it has basically the equivalent of a project explorer. It shows you everything you have for the current project. This is your toolbar, for lack of better words. It's called the widget or palette. It's called the palette, and it holds your widgets. This is your work area right here, and if you think that's small, you can blow it up by using the zoom in and zoom out buttons, etc. This is called your component tree. So as you add different things into here, they're shown here. And this is your properties window. So you've seen similar things to this before inside of Visual Studio, but they're not identical. When we start to add code, then you'll notice how this changes. Rather than showing all this stuff here, you'll still have your project area, and then this will be your code window. All right. This choose device, for when we start, we're going to be clicking the launch emulator and setting up our own emulator. It's not a difficult process. I'm not a hardware guy, and if I can do it, you can do it. So the first app that we will create in here, it's in the book already. And it's a tip calculator. So for instance, if I put $34.60 in here, all right, and I click the button here, and I said I had 15% for my tip, okay, then this will change right here. So this will take $34.60 and multiply it by 15, which is about $5, something like that. All right, so we'll put $5 or let's say $6 here. Then it'll add the $34.60 and the $6 and put $40.60 right there. If I want to give a bigger tip, I can press the plus button. If I want to give a smaller tip, I can press the minus button. Now that's it. Let's see where we are here. I don't know if it's finished with the download here yet or not. It still says that it's got 3 minutes to go. And I've told it to open up once it finishes loading. So I'd like to keep this up on the screen, because what I'd like to do is kind of mimic what's in these last few slides here. So I'd like to go back to here, starting with slide 11, and show you that and that and that and that. And I guess not that yet. This is what we'll start going over in chapter 2. And it still says we have 2 minutes or so to go. All right, I guess I can mention while we're doing this and waiting for it, again, in the next chapter, we will go over chapter 2, all right, how to start your first Android app. And you'll see we will build this. Okay, the completed app is given to you, but it's kind of neat to go over something like this so you get a little idea as far as what has to be done, how it has to be done, etc. Okay, at least in my opinion, it makes some sense, and it gets you actually going as far as what we will be doing here. All right, and I think there is a lot to be said for going over an example like this. Again, you may or may not agree as we go on in here. So looks like we've got 1 more minute, and in 1 more minute this should open up. Again, I'm not trying to waste your time. Remember to go to the install window, bump that down in size just a tad. So this is where you're going to end up going. https://developer.android.com/studio/install.html. Looks like I've got about 30 seconds to go, and then this file should open up. What you should notice, I believe at least, when I go through here, I will accept all of the defaults. So the install after we get this loaded, it's not a big thing. It really and truly, hopefully at least, won't take very long. I've got about 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Should start up very quickly. All right. So it says opening when complete, and ideally it's going to open up in just a matter of seconds. There it is. Run. It says that it's loading, it's verifying the installer is okay. All right. Ideally, what we're going to see here is in here we'll see Android Studio. So it tells me to follow the setup wizard, which I haven't seen come up yet. There it is. Do I want to allow changes? Yes. So here it is. Welcome to setup. Click next to continue. It says it will guide you through the process. It's recommended you close all other apps. I'm not going to do that, even though it recommends you do. I'm going to accept everything that's here. To get started, I agree with all that. It'll put it on program files, Android Studio, and it's already got the SDK location. All right, it says select how would you like to create the new shortcut. Android Studio is fine. I'm clicking install. I don't know how fast this process is. It took quite a while to load it. So what I'm going to do while this goes through like this is I'm going to pause the video, and when I get close to finishing, I'll start it back up again. Well, I really didn't even have to pause because you can see how fast this is loading. I only paused for about 30 seconds or so, and it's already quite a bit of the way through here. So ideally it'll be done in about half a minute or so. Always when it gets down to the end, it takes the most time, and it's got to do its other intermediate files. So again, not sure how long this will take. Rather than doing what I just did, that being pausing. If it seems to take a while, I'll pause again. So this is only at 6%, so I am going to pause, and I'll come back in just a couple minutes. Alright, I started back up again. As you can see, this is just about finished. It took approximately 10 minutes to go through the rest of the installation process. I didn't want to waste your time, so for those 10 approximate minutes, I just muted, or I should say, what's the word I'm looking for? Paused the video. Alright, it says completed, so I'm going to click next and finish. So let's see now if I click here and I go down. Oh, let's see, hold on. It says you can import your settings from a previous version of Studio. Says I do not have a previous version of Studio, or I do not want to import, so that's fine. And it's going to start up Android Studio. So here we go. Notice it's powered by IntelliJ, which is a maker of a lot of different IDEs, specifically for PHP programming language. Welcome back. This will validate your current Android SDK and development setup. You will have the option to download a new Android SDK or use an existing. So I'm going to click Next. Choose the type of setup you want, standard. And I believe that's all fine. Click Finish. It's got to download some more components. Hopefully this won't take long. It looks like it's not going to, so I'm not going to pause the video. But while that's going, I just want to look here and click Start. And there's Android Studio. Okay. Again, when it's going through this unzipping process, there are a bunch of files that it downloads that it does put into zip files. And as just mentioned, it's doing the download on those. All right. This has already been over a half an hour on the length of this particular video. So I think, again, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to pause. And when it gets done, I'll start back up with a few last words. All right, so it looks like under the downloading components, it says my SDK is up to date, so I can finish. So what do I want to do? I don't think I'm going to do any of these, so I'm just going to click here, and I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to go down to Android Studio, and underneath it, you can see the logo, Android Studio New. I'm going to take that and I'm going to pin that to my start menu, and I'm also going to pin it to my taskbar, so I've got it down here. So I click on that and it's going to start up Android Studio. Again, this is the first time. Well, you already saw that. So we will start a new Android project. And we're going to pick it up right here in the next lecture.